Oh, let's wait, Rob. Let's wait until just give it a couple minutes. Hey, good evening, ladies and gentle drunks. My name is Kevin Olson. I'm a recovered alcoholic. Hello, hello. I want to welcome you all to the fourth dimension. Big book study, that is. I'm glad you guys are all here. I know I'm certainly glad I'm here. I never feel more alive than when I'm sharing the miracle of recovery and God's power in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous that I discovered in a book called Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's the book we're going to share together tonight. And I'm excited to do that with you guys. I love this program. I love this book. I love this way of life. And I love all of you. So I'm glad you guys are here. Thanks for joining us. As we always do, let's kick off with the set-aside prayer. It goes a little something like this. Sing along if you know the words. God, please help me to set aside everything I think I know about you, about me, about my fellow man, and about the 12 steps. And please allow me to gain a fresh new vision, perspective, and understanding of what you, what me, what my fellow man, and the 12 steps are all about. Amen. And as this is the fourth dimension big book study, I always like to read the two parts of our book that refer to the fourth dimension. So first of all, on page 8, Bill Wilson writes that I was soon to be catapulted into what I like to call the fourth dimension of existence. I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. And then on page 25, Bill Wilson writes that we have found much of heaven and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence of which we had not even dreamed. So, brothers and sisters, we're going to be catapulted. We're going to be rocketed. And for all who will, for the sake of tradition and custom of the fourth dimension big book study, everybody please put one hand up like this. Everybody please put up another hand up like this. And everybody go, oh yeah. Raising that roof. Raising that roof. All right. I'm going to have a good time tonight. I hope you guys do too. It's entirely optional, but it's highly recommended. We absolutely insist on enjoying life here in Alcoholics Anonymous. So tonight we're going to continue through our journey in the doctor's opinion. And I will say that I actually went back and learned a little bit more about this chapter. About what Dr. Silkworth, the letter that he wrote, and why that letter was written, and how it was written, and when it was written, and so on and so forth. And it was I learned something about this chapter that I want to share with y'all. And so I'm excited to do that. We're not going to try to push much further past the doctor's opinion tonight. We're going to go through the cycle again. One of the things that I mentioned last week that I often will ask people to do in terms of participation in this study is to getting engaged in a little bit of back and forth and sharing a little bit of yourselves in addition to the study, and it makes it more meaningful for all of us, okay? And one of the things we talked about doing, guys, in the spirit of making this transition from being takers to being givers, okay? And once again, this is the transition. This is the transition that I need to make in Alcoholics Anonymous. I need to make a transition from being a taker to being a giver in AA, okay? For years in my life, man, I was nothing but a taker, okay? I'm a something for nothing guy, man, okay? That's how I am. Give me the bottle and put it on my tab. I'll pay you later, okay? And give me the dope. Front me the dope, okay? You know I'm good for it. Okay, I'm a taker. And the problem is I bring that same attitude to AA and it doesn't work, man. Okay, it does not work because I can't run game on God. I can't jive God. Okay, it's not going to work that, nor can I jive my sponsor for that matter. Okay, if I'm going to get sober in Alcoholics Anonymous and I'm going to enjoy happy, contented, permanent recovery. Our book talks about permanent recovery. Man, that's what I wanted. I was tired of being a donkey. I was tired of flailing through life and flailing in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous for years, man. I was looking for permanent recovery, and that's what our book talks about. And that's what's available to us in AA, man. Happy, contented, permanent recovery from this disease. But I have to make this transition. So it wasn't just about me going to a couple meetings and taking what I could and getting just well enough to go get sick again. Just getting healthy enough for a nice long relapse. Learning enough to learn, learning enough about how to work an honest program to go work it dishonestly. Okay? I had to get involved in Alcoholics Anonymous. I had to start doing Alcoholics Anonymous, and I had to start contributing back to Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, guys, I believe the most important word in Alcoholics Anonymous, the most important word in AA is a 2-letter word. It starts with a D, okay? D-O, the word do. That's the only word that matters to me in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's the only word that's ever meant anything to me in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's the only thing that ever made any difference in AA for me. AA did not work when I needed it, and AA did not work even when I wanted it. AA only works when I do it. And as my grand sponsor Clancy says, man, the steps in AA don't care why I do them. We do not have a motivational requirement here in AA. Anyone here ever said that or ever heard that? You know, I was in AA, but I was doing it for the wrong reasons. I had, you know, we often hear that, right? I need to be doing it for myself. It does not matter why you're doing it. If you're here because you want to get your kids back, do it for your kids, but do it. God will transform you if you are doing it. You want to do it because you're getting your job back? That's fine, but do it. You want to do it because you want to stay out of jail? That's fine, but do it. Okay? The problem is not that Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't work 100% of the time. The problem is I don't work 100% of the time. Okay? So all of that to say, guys, the transition that we need to make in AA is the transition from being a taker to being a giver. On that point, we've talked about the cycle of alcoholism. And tonight we're going to go back, we're going to read the doctor's opinion, we're going to go through it again, we're going to reread the cycle and so on, okay? But we talked last week about how I work with sponsees. I have my sponsees come up with 5 stories from their own life that match or mirror the cycle of alcoholism. Okay, that cycle, the cycle of alcoholism, and I'll share it here with you guys right now. There it is. Can you guys see the cycle on the screen right now? Okay, the cycle of alcoholism that we get from the doctor's opinion, this is the symptomology or the pathology for the disease of alcoholism. And what I need to do, because Dr. Silkworth isn't here to diagnose us, as he diagnosed Bill Wilson as a man that he believed was an alcoholic, we have to diagnose ourselves. And how do we do that? We look at our own lives and see, do I exhibit the symptoms of this disease? Okay, and the way to do that is to come up with 5 stories from our own life that match this cycle. How do we do that? We start at firm resolution, a time that I swore off. I sang the alcoholic national anthem. Okay, we all know it. That's it. I'm never drinking like that again. I'm done. I'm through. I'm finished. Okay, I know that everyone on this call has said those magic words and failed. I know that. Because if you had the strength and the willpower on your own to just say those words and stop, there would be no need for you to come to Alcoholics Anonymous. The problem is we do not have the power to keep ourselves sober once we have made that firm resolution. Why? Because when I get sober, I don't get better. I get worse. I get what Dr. Silkworth referred to as restless, irritable, discontent, fear, bewilderment, frustration, despair, living with this, what we call a spiritual sickness. And this is what alcoholism looks like to me when you take the booze away. Bob Darrell, great AA speaker, says alcoholism is a disease that begins when I stop drinking. Now that sounds backwards. I get it. Okay, because people go, alcoholism is a drinking problem. No, it's not. Alcoholism is a drinking solution to the problem of how I feel when I get sober. That's the problem. And it gets so bad when I'm sober, so painful when I'm sober, that I will pick up another drink again. I will pick up the drink. I will believe a lie that this time it'll be okay. This time it'll be different. This time I'll be able to distinguish the truth from the false. I believe the lie. I pick up the drink, triggered the physical allergy that we talked about last week, that physical allergy manifesting itself in a craving for more alcohol. The more that I drink, the more that I want. The more that I drink, the stronger that craving becomes, okay? And there is medical scientific reasons behind that we know, we've identified. That look up THIQ, tetrahydroisoquinoline, okay? They can synthesize this in a laboratory. And this is what you and I create in our bodies when we become triggered by this physical allergy. We start to create this THIQ, tetrahydroisoquinoline, okay? And I've read articles. They can take this stuff and synthesize it in a laboratory. And if they take this stuff, this THIQ, and inject it into a lab rat, 2 lab rats, one without and one with THIQ. The one with THIQ, if given the choice between drinking fresh, clean water and drinking pure alcohol, will drink pure grain alcohol until it dies. Which a vague resemblance to me in about 1998. Okay? That's what I looked like. Okay? A lab rat sucking on a bottle of vodka. Okay? That is me under the physical allergy and the craving of alcohol. We go through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging morsel with a firm resolution not to drink. Okay? So what I need to do is find 5 stories from my own life that match this cycle. 5 times that I swore off, got sicker and crazier and more emotional and more pain and more restless, irritable, and discontent when I was sober. What is the lie? What was the exact moment, the exact lie, the exact insanity that I fell prey to? What was the peculiar mental twist that I believed that convinced me it would be okay to pick up a drink so I could get that sense of ease and comfort, just take the edge off, trigger the allergy, and I'm gone again, okay? So in the spirit of making the transition from takers to being givers, this is our first opportunity, okay? And I'll tell you why. First of all, because you're going to participate in the study tonight. You're going to come up with some stories from your own life, and I want to hear from you guys, stories from your life that match this cycle. But here's the other reason. I get my sponsees to identify these 5 stories, first of all, so that they can qualify themselves as an alcoholic. But the next reason that I want them to have these stories locked in and in their back pocket, ready to go right away. Can anyone guess? Anyone want to guess why it's important for me to have these 5 stories ready at any point? Anyone want to unmute and take a guess?
So you can share them with a newcomer.
Oh yeah! Nailed it. Exactly right, Richard. And this is our first chance to start making this transition, guys, from being takers to being givers. What our book says is that when I am properly armed with the solution and the facts about myself, I can generally win the confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. And until that has occurred, little or nothing can be accomplished. Okay? And I can show others, I can show a newcomer that I understand, not just the way that they drink, but the way that they feel and the way that they think. How? By telling them we refer to these at Primary Purpose Group as cycle stories. Okay? I share the cycle stories with a newcomer because when I'm talking to a newcomer, guys, I'm not talking to them about their drinking. I want to talk to them about my drinking. This is how I thought. This is how I felt. And as a result, this is how I drank. Guys, when we talk about unmanageability in step 1, the unmanageability in the second part of step 1, okay, that unmanageability is not the wrecked cars and the lost jobs and the broken windows. The unmanageability of alcoholism, drunk or sober, the unmanageability of alcoholism is the way that I think and the way that I feel. Okay. And the way that I think, the way that I feel is not improved when you take alcohol away. Does that make sense, you guys? The way that I think and the way that I feel gets worse when you take alcohol away, which is why my life is unmanageable when I'm drinking and why my life is unmanageable when I'm sober. And the way that I think and the way that I feel will always take me back to drinking again in untreated alcoholism. Does that make sense, you guys? I love seeing nodding heads, man. I love seeing nodding heads. Okay. So with that said, guys, I want you to start thinking about your cycle stories. I want you to start thinking about stories from your own life. And here, guys, I want to be clear. If I ask you to participate with respect, we're not asking to hear your life story, okay? We're asking to hear one cycle story, one time, one fragment in time where you swore off, became spiritually sick in sobriety, had an insane thought, and exactly what was the thought? Took the first drink, and the rest is uniform, man. We know what happens. You kicked off the spree, emerged remorseful. We've all been there. None of that is unique. The most important thing is from firm resolution, restless, irritable, and discontent, had the insane thought, believed the lie, and picked up the drink. You guys with me on that? So I want you to think about those types of stories. I'm going to ask you to participate towards the end of tonight to bring some of those out from you guys to share that with us, okay? To share that with all of us. And in so doing, we begin to make that transition from being a taker, and you're giving us some of yourself. And that is why Alcoholics Anonymous is so powerful, because we share ourselves in Alcoholics Anonymous, don't we? We share ourselves, and not just our virtues. I promise you one thing, we are far more brothers and sisters in our defects than we are in our virtues, okay? And so we're going to share those with each other tonight. We're going to share some cycle stories with each other tonight, okay? And I'll give you one more example from my own life before we get into it, and then we'll talk more about it. But for right now, guys, I want to share with you some of the history of this that I have learned now. And I've been unfortunately sharing some misinformation for a while. What I didn't understand, and I thought this was really cool. If we look at the letter that Dr. Silkworth writes, and I know we read this last week, we talked about how it said, very truly yours, William D. Silkworth, MD, and so on. And maybe Rob has been sharing this in the group chat, and if he has, that's excellent. What I didn't know is that Dr. Silkworth did not originally write this letter for the Big Book. He originally wrote the letter, the first letter that we see on page XXIII and on to XXIV. He originally wrote that letter to give to Bill Wilson, who was running around trying to raise money for the Big Book. So that letter was not going to be included. That's not why Dr. Silkworth wrote it in the first place. He wrote that letter, and it was actually on Charlie Town's letterhead, and he did sign his name to the bottom of it, but it was so that Bill and Hank Parkhurst and some of the early members who were raising money for the book could go build credibility for themselves. Dr. Silkworth wrote this letter, okay? They were raising money, and they talked to a doctor at Johns Hopkins hospital, and someone there said, you know, they read Bill's story, and they read There Is a Solution, the original manuscript of those two books, which is all they had at the time. Those were the only chapters they had, and they were trying to get funding for the rest of the book. And one of the doctors read those two chapters and said, you know, this is really great, but what you should do is get a medical doctor to write some of your book for you. And the light went off and thought, got it. We'll ask Dr. Silkworth if we can print his letter in the book and then maybe write a little bit more into the book. So that was the original history of this letter. He didn't originally write it for the book. He originally wrote it for Bill and Bob and Hank Parkhurst to do some fundraising. Then, because another doctor said, you guys should really include some of this stuff, then they printed the letter as well as the rest of of everything else that he wrote was written specifically for the big book. So it's not that the rest of the letter that we see then on page XXV was written in a later edition, in the second edition of the big book or anything like that. It was always in the first edition of the big book, first edition, volume 1. It was always in there. They had just written it after Dr. Silkworth had originally written this letter to help them do some fundraising. So I thought that was fascinating. I actually didn't know that until I dove a little bit deeper into it just last week. So we're all learning, guys. Okay, I know you know what, I've been teaching this big book study for 15 years, but understand I am still a student of this beautiful book. Okay, and always will be. I love this book. This book changed and saved and gave me a life. It didn't even save my life, it gave me a life, and I will always continue to study and learn more about it. So I thought that was fascinating. In any event, guys, let's go back to page XXVI, and we're going to be at the bottom, and we're going to read through the cycle. And this is where we get the cycle from the doctor's opinion. And Ben, Brad is not here again. Do you mind being a reader for us, Ben? Am I putting you on the spot when I ask you to do that? Ben, I would love it. I would love it if you continue to be a reader for us. That's excellent. So let's start again at the bottom of page XXVI, Men and Women Drink. And remember last week we talked about this, guys. And this is just a little affectation that I have. If your sponsor disagrees, your sponsor is right, okay? But what I ask my sponsees to do is to cross out Men and Women Drink and write Alcoholics Drink so that we're clear here about exactly who we're talking about. We are talking about alcoholics here, okay? Alcoholics drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. So we're going to read through this, and I want you guys to see and to understand that this is the cycle of alcoholism. This is where we get it. So put a big star beside it. Okay, right. This is the cycle. Okay, cycle of alcoholism. This is essentially Dr. Silkworth gives us our problem. Dr. Silkworth is giving us step 1 right now. Okay, physical allergy, mental obsession, spiritual malady. Okay. So with that said, Ben, would you please read for us?
Alcoholics drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, they cannot, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks which they see others taking with impunity. After they have succumbed to the desire again, as so many do, and the phenomenon of craving develops, they pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful, with the firm resolution not to drink again. This is repeated over and over, and unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there is very little hope of his recovery.
All right, read the next paragraph for us, too.
On the other hand, and strange as this may seem to those who do not understand, once a psychic change has occurred, the very same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol, the only effort necessary being that required to follow a few simple rules.
Okay, and so there's a lot to say here about that, guys. Obviously, this is the cycle of alcoholism. You've seen it. We at Primary Purpose Group take it and visualize it in the cycle as we have it laid out. We actually hang it up on our wall, and it's something that we reference a lot of times with new people and newcomers and sponsees, because this is, for a lot of us, this is the first real aha moment. Okay, in terms of understanding the disease and what's wrong with us and why do we keep going back to drinking over and over. So let me ask a question. Dr. Silkworth says we are restless, irritable, and discontent unless we can again experience a sense of ease and comfort that comes at once by taking a few drinks. Okay? Guys, am I restless, irritable, and discontent when I'm drunk? Or am I restless, irritable, and discontent when I'm sober? Sober. Okay? My problem, therefore, is not drinking. My problem is that I become restless, irritable, and discontent when I am sober. And the only solution I have ever found prior to Alcoholics Anonymous to soothe that emotional pain and that spiritual sickness is by taking a few drinks. Okay? And so I am not a problem drinker. I am a solution drinker. I have a drinking solution to my living problem, my living sober problem. You guys understand what I'm saying? You guys with me on that? Okay. That is the disease of alcoholism. Okay. That is not a drinking problem. Let me tell you, I had coffee with a guy earlier today, who he was 26 and man, he was, when he was 26, he's in his 50s now, but he's like, oh yeah, I used to, have a problem. Like when I was drinking, when I was 26, I started doing cocaine. And then one day I was going to get more and I decided I didn't want to do that anymore. And so I stopped right then and there. He's like, but I know. And I just said, no, you don't. Okay. You and I are not suffering from the same thing, fella. Okay. Because look, when he stopped drinking, he felt better. He had a drinking problem. Okay. And so when it says drinks we see others taking with impunity, what we're talking about there, and we're going to refer more to this when we get to the chapter, there is a solution. We're talking about moderate drinkers and heavy drinkers. And thank God I learned about that. Thank God Alcoholics Anonymous and men and women in AA sat down with me and sat down with this book and explained the difference to me between a moderate drinker, a heavy drinker, and real alcoholics like me. Because as a real alcoholic, taking alcohol away from me does not make me better. It makes me worse. Do you guys know, and this is a little on a sadder note, but did you know that most alcoholics that commit suicide and take their own life and die by suicide, I think is the right way to say it now these days, that die by suicide when they're sober, not when they're drinking, okay? Because when I'm drinking, man, I got the mojo working. I got the medicine working. Most alcoholics do not die by suicide when they're drinking. Most alcoholics that die by suicide die when they're sober. Why? Because of this intense restlessness, irritability, discontent, this spiritual sickness. Okay? So now Dr. Silkworth says that the way out of this is a psychic change. Okay? Hallelujah. How do we achieve a psychic change in Alcoholics Anonymous? By doing step one, by understanding the cycle? No. And I can't emphasize this enough, guys, because some of you are here right now in this study and you're learning this cycle for the first time and you're thinking, my God, that's it. I understand. Now I've got the solution. Wrong. Now all you understand is the problem. We do not achieve a psychic change as a result of learning the cycle and doing step one. We achieve a psychic change by doing the rest of the 12 steps. On that note, and this is a little, again, this, you can think of this as a little Kevinism if you want, okay? I think that Dr. Silkworth refers to psychic change because he is a medical doctor, he is a psychiatrist, he was a neurologist. He doesn't want to get into the spiritual aspect of all this stuff, so he calls it a psychic change. I think it's dangerous in Alcoholics Anonymous for us to say our solution is a psychic change. Our solution is not a psychic change. If that were the case, psychiatrists would get alcoholics sober, and they don't. Our solution is a spiritual awakening as the result of the 12 steps, okay? Our solution is getting connected to a power greater than ourselves, a spiritual power that many of us refer to as God, G-O-D. If that word makes you bristle with antagonism, I'm with you 100%. It used to drive me crazy, but I had to find a way to reconcile myself with that idea that this is not just about psychology or psychiatry, or our book says if morality or a better philosophy of life was sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have gotten sober a long time ago. This is not just about a psychic change. This is about a spiritual awakening. So I encourage you to consider crossing out psychic change and writing spiritual awakening, because Dr. Silkworth doesn't fully understand what we need to do, nor does he need to, man. He's not an alcoholic. His life doesn't depend on it. Ours does. Which brings me to another point. I mentioned this last week. In the first edition, the doctor's opinion was on page 1. We talked about this last week. Remember that? The second edition, it was relegated to the Roman numerals. Okay, and why is that? Well, it's because in the spirit of the book, they wanted the message to alcoholics, in the spirit of Alcoholics Anonymous, to be written only by alcoholics. So that's why page 1 now starts with Bill's story, because they wanted this to be by alcoholics, for alcoholics, to alcoholics, okay? With alcoholics. Okay, we never want to talk to an alcoholic. We never want to talk down to an alcoholic. We never want to talk at an alcoholic. We want to talk with an alcoholic. Okay, and so that's why they moved Dr. Silkworth's opinion, the doctor's opinion, to the Roman numerals, because they wanted the message of AA to be by alcoholics, for alcoholics only. That's why Bill's story starts on page 1. You guys with me on that? All right. Okay, Ben, let's get back to it. We're going to read through the rest of the doctor's opinion, then we'll finish the rest of today really just going through the cycle. And I want to hear some of your stories, okay? And we'll talk through it together. So back to you, Ben.
Men have cried out to me in sincere and despairing appeal. Doctor, I cannot go on like this. I have everything to live for. I must stop, but I cannot. You must help me. Faced with this problem...
That's the firm resolution right there. Okay, you just heard that alcoholic say the firm resolution. I must stop. I have everything to live for. I'm willing to do anything. Okay, back to you, Ben.
Faced with this problem, if a doctor is honest with himself, he must sometimes feel his own inadequacy. Although he gives all that is in him, it often is not enough. One feels that something more than human power is needed to produce the essential psychic change.
There, you see what Dr. Silkworth is saying? Something more than human power is required to produce the essential psychic change. He's even admitting himself, you know, we do not have the power to do this. Guys, every AA meeting we go to, you hear this. The 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. What are they talking about? How many times, how many hundreds of times have you heard that sitting in a meeting? And have you ever stopped? Did I ever stop to think about what did they really mean by that? It really refers to a few different things, and we'll get more into it, but one of the things it refers to is Dr. Silkworth. Dr. Silkworth could not get Bill Wilson sober. No human power could produce the essential psychic change. Okay, back to you, Ben.
Though the aggregate of recoveries resulting from psychiatric effort is considerable, we physicians must admit we have made little impression upon the problem as a whole. Many types do not respond to the ordinary psychological approach. I do not hold with those who believe that alcoholism is entirely a problem of mental control. I have had many men who had, for example, worked a period of months on some problem or business deal which was to be settled on a certain date favorably to them. They took a drink a day or so prior to the date, and then the phenomenon of craving at once became paramount to all other interests, so that the important appointment was not met. These men were not drinking to escape. They were drinking to overcome a craving beyond their mental control. There are many situations which arise out of the phenomenon of craving, which cause men to make the supreme sacrifice rather than continue to fight.
Okay, and what does he mean there? What do you think the supreme sacrifice is rather than to continue to fight? Sadly, it's that they they die by suicide. Okay, they die by suicide. Why? Because of everything that has happened again in this spree, when they emerge remorseful, the guilt, the pain, the horror of living an alcoholic life becomes unbearable. And man, that's what we're up against here, guys. Okay, when we say that alcoholism is a fatal malady, what we're really up against in Alcoholics Anonymous, yes, I mean, things become very dangerous when you add drugs to the equation, and a lot of us do that. Okay, in these days of fentanyl, that's a very usual, typical way for people to lose their lives. But in AA, when we say it's a fatal malady, to me, suicide and alcoholism go hand in hand. They always did for me. Okay, and that's what we're up against. Okay, one of the things I always point out, or that I'm aware of, is in the chapter to employers later in the book. Okay, in that chapter, there's 3 stories of 3 men that Hank Parkhurst, who wrote that chapter, refers to. 3 different stories of 3 different alcoholics and what happened to them. And all 3 of those stories end with those individuals dying by suicide. Okay? That's what we're up against. That's the fatal illness. That is alcoholics making the supreme sacrifice rather than continuing to fight. If you're here tonight and you're sober, and maybe you haven't been sober for very long, maybe you're coming back to Alcoholics Anonymous after a slip, okay? I want you to know that you do not have to make that supreme sacrifice, and you can continue to fight, and that there is a reason and a purpose for you being here, and that we have a solution upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. Okay, and we absolutely have a way out. No matter how astonishingly difficult your problems may seem right now, I promise you that Alcoholics Anonymous has a solution. I always like to say, guys, that there's only 2 rules in AA. I can't drink and I can't commit suicide. Any other problem I might have, we have a solution for in AA. I have brought to my sponsor over the last 16 years that I've been sober, you better believe me, I have brought some big problems to my sponsor. Big problems, big hurts, big hurt to my sponsor. I have brought some big pain to my home group, and I can promise you we have found a way out. The only rules were that I couldn't drink and I couldn't commit suicide, because we do not have a solution for those 2 problems. You guys with me on that? You guys understand what I'm saying? Anything else, any other pain, any other loss, any other grief, any other guilt, any other regret that you may have, you bring it to us. The power of God will transform it with us for you in this program, and I promise you there's a way out, okay? So please keep fighting. Don't ever think about making that supreme sacrifice. And if you are, please talk to one of us. Please. All right, Ben, back to you, buddy.
The classification of alcoholics seems most difficult and in much detail is outside the scope of this book.
Okay, so I just want to jump in. Ben, I'm sorry to interrupt right away like that. I should have been more clear about this. Dr. Silkworth now is going to go in and he's going to classify different types of alcoholics that he has seen. Okay, and I know one of the things I used to love to do is to, just get in there and see, like, well, which one of these am I? Which one do I identify with? Okay, and I mean, do that if you like, but there is, at the end, there is going to be one unifying, significant attribute of all of these alcoholics, and that's the primary thing that I need to focus on. So he's going to talk about all the different nuances and different kinds of alcoholics and so on and so forth. So let's talk about these a little bit, but just understand that I can get right down in the weeds on this. There's really only one thing that I need to be clear on, one significant attribute, and Dr. Silkworth is going to summarize it all at the end for us, okay? Back to you, Ben.
The classification of alcoholics seems most difficult and in much detail is outside the scope of this book. There are, of course, the psychopaths who are emotionally unstable. We are all familiar with this type. They are always going on the wagon for keeps. They are over remorseful and make many resolutions but never a decision. There is the type of man who is unwilling to admit that he cannot take a drink. He plans various ways of drinking. He changes his brand or his environment. There's the type who always believes that after being entirely free from alcohol for a period of time, he can take a drink without danger. There is the manic depressive type, who is perhaps the least understood by his friends and by whom a whole chapter could be written. Then there
Okay,
are types.
I just want to point out about the manic depressive type, because I'll say like 20 years ago in AA, we used to hear about manic depression a lot. We used to hear about bipolar a lot. Almost every other person you would meet in AA would be bipolar. Okay, it's just the way it was. That's kind of changed a little bit now. Now it's ADHD. I don't know what it is, but everyone and their dog has ADHD in AA. It happens all the time. I hear it all the time. Okay, raise your hand if you or someone you know in AA has been diagnosed with ADHD in like the last little while. You see it all the time. Okay, and I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with that. Another one that we hear about a lot is borderline personality disorder, BPD. Okay, we'll hear about that a lot. That comes up a lot in AA these days. What I want to say about them is that I am someone that suffered greatly from mental health issues as well. I used to do, I went for a while to the Foothills Clinic, to the dual diagnosis clinic, where I was treated for mental health and addiction and so on and so forth. My experience is that when I focused on having a solid foundation of Alcoholics Anonymous under me, I'm not saying that that was the singular solution to all of my mental health issues. What I am saying is having that solid foundation of the 12 steps underneath me as the foundation that I could live on, then sober and living rightly with guidance of a good sponsor and the support of my home group, then I was able to go deal with the mental health issues that I had. Okay, what our book says is that when the spiritual malady is overcome, then I straighten out mentally and physically. I kept getting it backwards. I kept saying, no, I'll take care of the mental and the physical first, and I'll do all that. And then in addition to that, I'll work on AA. And I'm just saying for myself, my experience is that it's when I surrendered to AA and got that solid foundation, the support of a home group, support of a sponsor, and a relationship with God, then I was able to go and see the doctors and see the psychiatrists and do the things I needed to do to attend to my mental health, just like I did my high blood pressure, just like I did all of the other things that I had going on in my life that I needed to attend to, okay? So I just wanted to mention that in terms of this manic depression piece in the book, because we used to hear about that a lot. And I think it's important to mention that a lot of us have mental health issues. I certainly did. I still attend to those, but it's really the foundation in AA that I was able to grow through those things. And we'll talk more about this when we get to step 4, and I'll share with you guys some of the deep trauma work that I had to do in addition to a 4-step in Alcoholics Anonymous. Does that make sense, you guys? Yeah? Okay, very good. Let's keep going.
Then there are the types entirely normal in every respect, except in the effect alcohol has upon them. They are often able, intelligent, friendly people. All these and many others have one symptom in common.
This is the one symptom, the one unifying significant symptom that we all have. Doesn't matter which type I am, so on and so forth. This is it. Dr. Silkworth is putting a big red bow on it, and let's be aware of it.
All of these and many others have one symptom in common. They cannot start drinking without developing the phenomenon of craving. This phenomenon, as we have suggested, may be the manifestation of an allergy which differentiates these people and sets them apart as a distinct entity. It has never been, by any treatment with which we are familiar, permanently eradicated. The only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence.
And that was in 1939 when the book came out. That was novel, man. Okay, no one, believe it or not, no one had ever suggested before abstinence as a solution for alcoholism. Okay, no one had ever just considered like, oh, maybe we can just not ever drink again. It was always about a moral problem or a moral failure, a moral failing. Then you'll be able to drink. Okay, no one had ever suggested don't drink and you won't trigger this allergy. Of course, the problem is when Dr. Silkworth suggests the only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence, we are people who are not able to maintain abstinence as a result of the restlessness, irritability, and discontent that we feel when we become sober, when you take alcohol away from us. So what do we need? We need to achieve this spiritual awakening as a result of the 12 steps. That's where real relief comes from. Chuck Chamberlain used to say, I'm an alcoholic who's not drinking today. Why? Because I have found in Alcoholics Anonymous what I was always looking for in the bottle. I have found a way to feel ease and comfort in sobriety as a result of the 12 steps in spiritual awakening in AA. Okay? Back to you, Ben.
This immediately precipitates us into a seething cauldron of debate. Much has been written pro and con, but among physicians, the general opinion seems to be that most chronic alcoholics are doomed. What is the solution? Perhaps I can best answer this by relating one of my experiences. About 1 year prior to this experience, a man was brought in to be treated for chronic alcoholism. He had but partially recovered from a gastric hemorrhage and seemed to be a case of pathological mental deterioration. He had lost everything worthwhile in life and was only living, one might say, to drink. He frankly admitted and believed that for him there was no hope. Following the elimination of alcohol, there was found to be no permanent brain injury. He accepted the plan outlined in this book, and 1 year later he called to see me, and I experienced a very strange sensation. I knew the man by name and partially recognized his features, but there all resemblance ended. From a trembling, despairing, nervous wreck had emerged a man brimming over with self-reliance and contentment. I talked with him for some time, but was not able to bring myself to feel that I had known him before. To me, he was a stranger, and so he left me. A long time has passed with no return to alcohol.
And I know Rob already indicated this, but for any AA history buffs, if you're interested in who is that talking about, it's one of the first 100 members of AA named Hank Parkhurst, who is a very, very key and important member in Alcoholics Anonymous. I would submit that our book would not have been published had it not been for Hank Parkhurst. I think it's safe to say that. And in that case, in that sense, my life and yours was saved by Hank Parkhurst. Okay, so that's who Dr. Silkworth is talking about there. He's going to give us another example here, and I'm sure Rob is aware and is going to throw it in, but this is referring to another early member by the name of Fitz Mayo, F-I-T-Z Mayo. They had weird names back then. I don't know why. This is Fitz Mayo, and he's talking about, if you read the book Our Southern Friend, it's referring to Fitz Mayo. Okay.
When I need a mental uplift, I often think of another case brought in by a physician prominent in New York. The patient has made his own diagnosis and decided his situation hopeless. Had hidden in a deserted barn, determined to die. He was rescued by a search party and in desperate condition brought to me. Following his physical rehabilitation, he had a talk with me in which he frankly stated he thought the treatment a waste of effort, unless I could assure him, which no one ever had, that in the future he would have the willpower to resist the impulse to drink. His alcoholic problem was so complex and his depression so great that we felt his only hope would be through what we then called moral psychology, and we doubted if even that would have any effect. However, he did become sold on the ideas contained in this book. He has not had a drink for a great many years. I see him now and then, and he is as fine a specimen of manhood as one could wish to meet. I earnestly advise every alcoholic to read this book through, and though perhaps he came to scoff, he may remain to pray. William D. Silkworth, MD.
Excellent job, Ben. Thank you so much for reading tonight, brother. I really appreciate that. As you guys know, there are several lines in the book that are very meaningful to me, and several lines in the book that I like to use as a baseline, as a benchmark to ask myself, how am I doing compared to this line? So that line, he is as fine a specimen of, it says manhood, for all of us, I can say as fine a specimen of adulthood or humanity as one could wish to meet. Okay, that's like if you went and saw my doctor, Dr. Collins, who has known me for many years. If you went and saw Dr. Collins, would he say that about me? Okay, earlier, Dr. Silkworth says you may rely absolutely on anything they say about themselves. Would Dr. Collins say that about Kevin? That's a good question. Okay, would Dr. Collins say about Kevin, Kevin is as fine a specimen of adulthood or fine a specimen of humanity as one could wish to meet? Well, that's what Dr. Silkworth was saying about the first 100 members. That was his impression of these men after this transformation, this spiritual transformation as a result of the ideas contained in this book. That's what Dr. Silkworth says. Fitzmayo became sold on the ideas contained within this book. And as a result of that, he became as fine a specimen of humanity as one could wish to meet. That's a good question for me to ask myself, how am I doing up against that guideline, that baseline, okay? So, guys, that's the end of the chapter. We've got 7 minutes left, and what I want to do, as promised, is I want to go through some cycle stories. We can get through at least 2, I think, of y'all's cycle stories. I'll share one more of mine to give you an idea of what they ought to sound like. Okay, and then I'm going to ask for some volunteers, and I'm hoping I'll have at least 2 people volunteer, and hopefully we'll be able to land right at 7 o'clock. So I had been in treatment. I had been working there for a long time. I'd been in treatment for a long time. I got out. I got a job in a restaurant. I was working at this restaurant. I also had another job as a bartender at this event, and as a result of that job at this event, I'd gotten paid a big bunch of cash, like in my hand. And I was at the restaurant, and I was feeling for sure restless, irritable, and discontent. I felt like no one in the restaurant liked me, but who cares, because I hated them all anyway. And I felt like I didn't fit in, and I didn't want to be there, and so on and so forth. And this guy came from this other gig and put a big chunk of cash in my hand, okay? And even though I had sworn off 9 months sober, 9 months earlier, I'd gone through treatment, but there I am in that restaurant, hating everything, hating everyone, filled with self-pity, filled with fear, okay? He put that money in my hand, and I had a thought. And what was the thought? After everything I had been through, dozens of treatment centers, dozens, hundreds of AA meetings at that point, I had this thought, and the thought was, you know what? I'm going to go out tonight. I'm going to have just 6 drinks, and it's going to be fine. I just got to take the edge off. It is insane that I believed that lie at that moment. I can show you where I was. Moxie's right downtown. I was working there. Okay, I could show you where I was standing when I had that thought. Okay, I know exactly where I was. It is insane that I believed that lie, but I did. And that night, I got thrown out of every bar on First Street in Calgary that night. Okay, I got thrown down a flight of stairs, and I got physically attacked and assaulted and ended up running home covered in my own blood that night. Okay, that's me drinking. All right, that's just a fun night out drinking. You know, that's how we are. Okay, so that's one of my cycle stories. And you notice I didn't focus a lot on the drinking. What I focused on was what? Swearing off. How did I feel? What was the thought? Pick up the drink, and we know where it goes from there. Okay, that's a cycle story. And why it's so effective is everyone who heard that story gets it instantly. It's not textbook, it's not educational or cerebral. It's in our guts, man. Every alcoholic knows it when we hear it, man, okay? So I want to hear, we might go a couple minutes over, but I'd love to hear a couple cycle stories from you guys. Anyone want to volunteer? Anyone brave enough to stick up their hand and give us a cycle story? Anyone at all? Ben, let it rip, brother.
Oh, I was muted. Sorry. My cycle story is I've been a construction worker my whole life, and I would get my paycheck on Friday, and by Monday, or probably most of the time it was Tuesday because I didn't like to go to work on Mondays. You know, I'd say not again this week. You know, I'm not doing that again this week. I went overboard, so I'd start the work week off on Tuesday, and it would be a miserable week. I'd hit my hand with the hammer, I'd measure things twice, cut it 3 times. Like, I was restless, irritable, and discontented. I would have a really bad week. And it'd get to like Friday, all day Friday, I'm wrestling at work. I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, I know I'm going to get my check as soon as I get off. I'm not drinking tonight. Or if I've already given up and like, I'm going to drink, I'm like, I'm just going to grab a sixer and go home. I'll watch the game or do something at home. And, you know, I always just said, fuck it. Like my thing is, I never told myself a lie because I knew every time I picked up a drink, I was going to be off and running. My biggest thing was I always just said, fuck it. There was never like, I didn't never lied. I just said, fuck it. I knew what was going to happen. I did it anyway. And then, you know, I would start off Friday. I'd have like $1,500 paycheck. And then by, like I said, Monday or Tuesday, whichever day I went to work, I would be broke, and I would wake up and I would say, I'm not doing this again. I'm never not doing it next week. This is going to be a good week and blah, blah, blah. And then Friday would roll around and I would wrestle with that thought. Like, am I going to use? Am I going to drink? Am I going to do this? Am I going to do that? And by the end of the day, when I had my paycheck in my hand, I always just was like, I'm just going to have one, or I'm just going to grab a 6 and go home. I'm not going out to the bar tonight, you know? And I lived that cycle for 20 years.
Beautiful. Excellent job, Ben. Excellent job. Excellent job. And I'll remind me of that, Ben, when we get to, there's a part in more about alcoholism, a couple chapters from now, where it says when we go out to drink deliberately instead of casually, we have to admit that there was little period of effective thought about what the horrific consequences were going to be of us drinking again. Okay. And for those of us who, a lot of us, when we get to the end, that's what it is. It's no longer believing these lies. It's the desperate experiment of picking up the first drink. And why do we attempt the desperate experiment? It's because of the emotional, spiritual restlessness, irritability, discontent, the pain that we're in. We've got to get that ease and comfort. Excellent job. Okay, let's get one more. We got 1 minute to go, but we'll likely go a couple minutes over today. Anyone else want to dive in? Anyone else want to share? Danelle.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Good. Okay, so I'll start with the firm resolution. I was in the back of an ambulance I was formed, and I was going to the hospital after having my child taken away from me from social services. And I remember being in the hospital and being okay, thinking, yes, I'm going to do this. I'm going to stop drinking. I'm never going to drink again. And by the time I got out of the hospital, I started feeling resentful, guilty. The shame and guilt was so unbearable that I was like, you know what? I just had a nervous breakdown. I can have one drink. I'm not going to drink vodka. I'll drink wine, and that will take the edge off. And then I was gone for another like 3 months, and then formed again.
Amen. That's excellent, Danelle. Excellent. Great job. Okay, and that takes us right to 7 o'clock, you guys. I love it, man. Best deal on earth. I love this study.